Hey there, kiddos. Welcome to your test corrections. Here is the very first one. It's problem number 4 from your test. So if you're looking at it, here's the problem. We want to know which of the following functions describes a line that passes through the point 6, -1 and has a slope of -1/2. Well, the first step it tells us to do is to identify our slope and x and y values from the point. Well, our slope, it says right here, so our m is -1/2. And then in our point, our x and y values, x is 6 and y is -1. And so then it says to recall slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b, and try to use process of elimination to make sure all the slopes match up. So our slope has to be -1/2. So let's go through our 4 answer choices and see how many of them have a slope of -1/2. Well, if you'll remember mx plus b, where m is the slope slope for a is -1/2 because that's what's in front of the x. B is also -1/2. So is C, and so is D. So step 2 didn't help. I couldn't eliminate anything. So step 3 says use your values of x and y from the point and plug in to see which one gives you a true statement. So we're going to plug these points into our equation. Remember, f of x is the same thing as y. So these are all like saying y equals. So I'm going to plug in what I know. Y is -1. I have -1/2 times x. Well, in this case, x is 6 minus 1. So we're going to simplify this and just see what happens. So I have -1 is equal to, well, 1/2 of 6 is 3. So -1/2 of 6 is -3 minus 1. And if I do that math, -3 minus 1, I get that -1 is equal to -4, which is not true, which means A is not my answer. So now I have to check the other ones. So let's go with B. We're going to check those. So I'm going to have -1 is equal to -1/2 times 6 minus 4. Now the great thing is that the first part of these equations are all the same because they're all -1/2 x. So I know I end up with -1 is equal to, well, over here it made -3, so here it still is -3 minus 4. And if I do that, -3 minus 4 is -7, so those don't equal, so it's not B. So for C, I have -1 is equal to -1/2 times 6 plus 2. So I have -1 is equal to -3 plus 2. And if I do -3 plus 2, I get -1. And so -1 really does equal -1. So my answer is C. Now number 4 says you can double check by plugging each function into your calculator and then graphing them. See if the slope is the same and if the line passes through that point. Well, we've got all the ones that have the same slope. So we're just going to check it on our calculator. So grab your calculator real quick. So grab your calculator and go to this button right here that says y equals, and we're going to type in our equations. And so you see the first one, we're just going to check 2 because we know what the answer is. Let's check A, which is -1/2 x minus 1. So on our calculator, we're going to type in negative, and then we're going to go alpha y equals and enter to make our fraction. So we'll have 1/2, and then right arrow to get out of that. And so you had x minus 1. And what I want to see is if that point 6 -1 is on my graph. Well, if I press second and graph, it gives me a table of all of the values associated with this graph. And so I want to see if 6 -1 is in there. So I'm going to go down to where x equals 6. And if you look, it says 6 -4. That's not the point I need, so I know that's not the answer. So let's go plug in what we had for C, which was -1/2 x plus 2. So all I have to do is change this last value down here to a plus 2. So I have plus 2. And then if I go second graph and look at those, you'll see right here I have 6 -1 absolutely shows up as my point on my graph, so that's how I know it's C. So you can always just plug them in your calculator, look at the table and find the point. But you have to make sure that the slopes also match. Don't just be like, oh yeah, that one works. You'd have to check the slope too. So that's number 4.